Have you ever actually wondered who decides your mortgage rate? Or why your supposedly secure retirement fund took that massive hit a couple of years ago? Hello everyone, I'm Taylor Reed and welcome to Dollar Playbook. Today, we're going to break down this totally invisible force that basically dictates our financial lives. We're relying completely on the facts and data from our source material to guide this explainer. My goal here is to make this super practical for you, so you can start making the absolute most of your money starting today.
So let's just dive right into it. The invisible engine, how the bond market controls your money. You know that mortgage rate you're looking at? Well, it wasn't actually chosen by your local bank, and it wasn't directly chosen by the Federal Reserve either. Nope, it comes from a staggering $145 trillion machine that quietly hums along in the background of our everyday lives. We're talking about the bond market. This invisible machine literally prices your car loan, your job security, and your savings. If you don't understand it, you're missing the biggest piece of your financial puzzle.
So here is what we are going to cover in this explainer. 1. The invisible financial machine. 2. Bonds and your mortgage. 3. The 2022 retirement trap. 4. Predicting economic trouble. And 5. Maximizing your safe cash.
All right, let's jump straight into Section 1, the invisible financial machine.
So what exactly is a bond anyway? Honestly, it's really just a simple loan. You see, when a government or a massive corporation needs money, they don't just walk down to a local bank. Instead, they borrow it directly from investors. You hand them a fixed amount of money, that's the principal, and in return, they promise to pay you a fixed interest rate every single year, which we call the coupon. Eventually, they return your original principal on a specific date known as maturity. It's essentially just a piece of paper that says, hey, lend me money now, I'll pay you interest along the way, and I'll give it all back later.
Now, the sheer scale of this market is what makes it so incredibly powerful. The United States government actually borrows more money than anyone else on Earth. Their interest payments alone, try roughly $1.05 trillion a year. Let me break that down. That is roughly $2.88 billion in interest being paid every single day. And this really matters to you because those interest payments, they come straight out of tax dollars. And the rates are set by this exact same market we're exploring today.
Okay, so here's the absolute crucial point. You have to understand the golden rule of bonds. If you remember literally just one thing from today, please let it be this. Step 1, when interest rates rise. Step 2, the price of existing bonds falls. They move in opposite directions every single time. Think of it like a seesaw. Imagine you hold a $1,000 bond paying 3%. That's $30 a year, right? Well, if brand new bonds come out paying 5% or $50 a year, nobody in their right mind wants your old 3% bond for $1,000. So to actually sell it, you have to drop your asking price to around $600 just to make the math competitive for the buyer. Basically, your initial investment loses value on paper.
Which brings us to Section 2, bonds and your mortgage.
When you walk into a bank to buy a house, they don't just magically invent your mortgage rate out of thin air. Instead, they look straight at the 10-year U.S. Treasury yield, which, right now, sits at around 4.5%. The bank naturally asks, hey, why would I lend money to a regular person for 30 years when I could just lend it to the U.S. government, completely risk-free, for 4.5%? And, well, they wouldn't. So they take that 4.5% and tack on roughly 2 percentage points to compensate for the risk that, an everyday person might lose their job or default. And boom, that brings your national average mortgage rate right up to roughly 6.52%.
Let's look at a real-world example from our source material to put this into perspective. Meet Brian. Brian needs a $400,000 30-year fixed mortgage. Back in January 2021, the 30-year fixed rate hit a crazy low of 2.65%. So Brian's monthly payment would have been $1,612. But if he bought that exact same house in October 2023, when rates peaked at 7.79%, his payment would have jumped to $2,877 a month. And honestly, this brilliantly illustrates the real cost we're talking about here. That is the exact same house, the exact same loan amount, and the exact same buyer. Literally, the only thing that changed was the yield on the 10-year Treasury in the bond market. But that one difference cost Brian an extra $1,265 every single month. Over the full 30-year life of the loan, the bond market basically handed Brian a $455,349 bill. And they did it all without ever even sending him an invoice.
Moving on to Section 3, the 2022 retirement trap.
For decades, we were all told that a 60-40 portfolio, 60% stocks for growth, 40% bonds for safety, was the sensible conservative default. Bonds were supposed to be your financial seatbelt. But then 2022 happened. The Federal Reserve raised interest rates faster than at any point in the last 40 years. And remember our golden rule? When rates rise, bond prices fall. So in 2022, not only did the S&P 500 drop 18.1%, but the supposedly safe broad U.S. bond market lost 13%. And long-dated Treasury bonds, they plummeted an astonishing 39.2%. The seatbelt didn't catch anyone. It was basically attached to the same crashing car.
Now, the reason some of these retirement funds got hit so much harder than others really comes down to one single, often ignored word that's printed right there on every bond fund's fact sheet: duration. Duration is simply a rough estimate of how much a bond fund is going to lose for every 1 percentage point rise in interest rates. Let me tell you, if you hold bond funds in your retirement account, this is a number you absolutely must know.
Let's put some real dollars to this concept so you can see what I mean. Imagine a retiree with $500,000 in a bond fund. If interest rates go up by just 1 percentage point, a fund with a standard duration of 6 will lose $30,000. But if she happens to be in a long-dated Treasury fund with a duration of 17, that exact same 1-point rate hike costs her $85,000. Think about that. Same retiree, same starting balance, same interest rate move. The duration is literally the difference between a small financial bruise and a broken leg.
Okay, let's shift gears to Section 4, Predicting Economic Trouble.
Did you know the bond market actually acts as a sort of check engine light for the global economy? It's true. When corporations start facing stress, the gap, or the spread, between super safe government bonds and risky corporate bonds gets much wider. Then, when fear spikes from a crisis, investors trigger what's called a flight to quality. They all rush to buy safe U.S. Treasuries, which drives yields way down. Conversely, when guaranteed bond yields go up, they reduce the overall appeal of putting your money in the risky stock market. The crazy thing is, the bond market usually moves before most economic data even hits the evening news.
One of the most fascinating predictors we have is the yield curve. Under normal circumstances, the longer you lock up your money, the more interest you demand for taking on that time risk, right? That just makes sense. On a normal yield curve, a 3-month loan might pay 3.71%, while a 30-year loan pays 5%. The yield slopes smoothly upward from left to right. This is the natural order of things when an economy is healthy.
But occasionally, this curve inverts. Short-term yields actually rise higher than long-term yields. When something like the 2-year Treasury starts paying more than the 10-year, the bond market is making a very loud, very specific prediction. It's expecting the economy to slow down so drastically that the Federal Reserve will be forced to cut rates. And get this, according to research from the Federal Reserve Bank of San Francisco, an inverted yield curve has preceded every single one of the last 10 U.S. recessions, going all the way back to 1955. It's quite literally a perfect 10 for 10 predictor. No way around it.
All right, let's bring it all home with Section 5, Maximizing Your Safe Cash. Let's look at current yields. Right now, the national average savings account pays a tiny 0.38%. Seriously, that is what most large traditional banks are giving you. Meanwhile, a 3-month U.S. Treasury bill is yielding around 3.71%, and the best high-yield savings accounts out there are paying roughly 4.20%. And here's the kicker. All 3 of these options are incredibly safe. T-bills are backed directly by the U.S. government, and high-yield savings accounts are FDIC insured, so you get the exact same safety but dramatically different yields.
Let's check back in on our friend Brian. But this time, let's say he has $50,000 in cash savings. At the average neighborhood bank rate of 0.38%, he earns a mere $190 a year. Ouch. But if he just moves that exact same $50,000 over into 3-month T-bills at 3.71%, he earns $1,855 a year. By just leaving his money sitting at a standard bank, Brian is missing out on over $8,000 in interest over 5 years. And he's doing that without taking on any additional risk. It's like leaving free money on the table.
Oh, and if you are specifically worried about the cost of living creeping up, you should know the U.S. Treasury also offers Series I savings bonds. These currently pay 4.26%, and the truly beautiful thing about them is that this composite rate actually adjusts with inflation. Now, there is a strict purchase limit. You can only put in $10,000 per person per year, but honestly, I bonds are simply the most direct inflation hedge available to a regular saver who just wants to protect their hard-earned cash.
So, at the end of the day, the bond market isn't just some playground for the ultra-wealthy. It's the underlying machinery that dictates your mortgages, your everyday savings, and ultimately, your financial stability. The people who truly understand it aren't necessarily smarter than you, they just stopped ignoring it. So I'm going to leave you with this question. Will you let this invisible machine run your money, or will you use this knowledge to build a stable, secure life for yourself?
Thank you so much for learning with me today. If this explainer helped connect the dots for you, please gently tap that like button, share this with someone who needs it, and subscribe to Dollar Playbook for more practical, everyday financial clarity. I'm Taylor Reed, and I'll see you next time.